For everyone with an interest in MASH or more broadly steatotic liver disease, Surf's Up, Season 5, Episode 17 of Surfing the MASH Tsunami. Our preview of next week's EASL Congress in Milano starts now.
Today on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
Today it's much more than a scientific congress. This is actually what we will call a global marketplace for everybody interested in the liver.
So it's like going to a place with a lot of very good restaurants, but you only have one stomach, so you have to decide where to go.
We're going to introduce there an abstract, or we're going to present an abstract on a totally new concept to treat steatotic liver disease using a transglutaminase inhibitor. So this is an early trial, phase 2A.
You can define the disease by metabolic risk factors and presence of fat in the liver, and then you can say, okay, this person is at so much risk of liver events. That means something to patients. It means something to health authorities, to payers, everybody.
I think this is really the way to go to, build big cohorts.
The complexity of the data increases, but we're still looking at some of the same pathways we've been studying. It's nice to see that this is reinforced even by the deeper analysis and levels of data that you're introducing here.
And if you multiply 900 patients, and each patient, if you do whole genome sequencing for just a host, and then you have similar for the guts. This is 10 to the 11th data in that study alone.
He works with a mathematician and a data scientist. But back in the days, you went to the lab and had a biologist and maybe a technician.
This is the 9th or 10th major meeting, if you count only EASL and AASLD that we've previewed. This is the first one we've done where people didn't start by talking about exciting drug development, and instead we started talking about exciting data development.
Every week, a global community of steatotic liver disease stakeholders comes together to explore the most critical challenges in diagnosing, treating, and developing medications for patients with MASLD and MASH. Join hepatology researcher and key opinion leader Jörn Schattenberg, pricing and forecasting guru Roger Green, and this week's guests, EASL Secretary General Aleksander Krag and his fellow hepatology researchers and key opinion leaders Hannes Hagstrom and Michelle Long, as they preview next week's 2024 EASL Congress, this week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
Remember to keep listening after the episode for this week's question of the week, sponsored by Madrigal Pharmaceuticals.
Hi, this is Roger Green, co-host of the Surfing the MASH Tsunami podcast. When we recorded this week's episode, Louise Campbell was still inaccessible in Australia, and Jörn Schattenberg was in transit between work and home. Jörn joins us about halfway through the episode. Even without my fellow surfers, though, this was an exciting, virtually electric conversation. If you enjoy hearing it half as much as we enjoyed recording it, you're in for a fantastic time. So I've always thought this is one of the most exciting weeks of the year in this community. I think people get a buzz around the EASL Congress like they get around no other meeting. Sorry, AASLD, I think your meeting is great, but people feel more buzzed for EASL. I don't know why. Maybe because I talk a lot to Europeans. But the buzz the week before this meeting is always an exceptional thing. And we are fortunate not only to get to do the preview this week, but to have with us the Secretary General of the EASL, Aleksander Krag. Aleksander, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Very enthusiastic for EASL Congress coming up next week. I'm very happy to hear that you share the enthusiasm.
Oh, it's like an underground cable. It goes across the Atlantic and it diffuses everybody. It's really a great thing. And then we have Hannes Hagstrom with us, our good friend. Hannes, how are you doing this evening?
Hello, Roger. I'm doing great. So happy to be here and looking very much forward to EASL meeting next week.
And then Michelle Long, who could be anywhere today. Michelle, where are you today?
I'm in Boston.
Okay, so you're on our side of the pond.
Yes.
Well, the other thing is the weather over here is beautiful. How's the weather in Scandinavia right now?
It's so beautiful in Scandinavia. This time of year, it's getting warm. It's green. Everything is flower. So if you don't need all that heat and you want beauty, this is the place to be.
The only problem is my wife kind of likes the beauty, but she loves the heat. So I'd go in a heartbeat. I seriously, I would be in northern New England, or I'd be in somewhere in Canada, at least this time of year. And Jörn will be joining us shortly. So why don't we just get started? Because we have a lot to talk about. Groundbreaker, one good thing, personal, professional, in the last week. Brave one, go first.
I'm just returning from Geneva. I think from a very important event. This week, it's the World Health Assembly, the General Assembly of WHO, where health ministers from 192 countries come together and try to inform global policies. That will inform regional policies and national policies. And there, EASL was an extension of the side event we had last year in EASL office headquarters in Geneva, where we gathered more than 20 international associations to put steatotic liver diseases and MASLD on the political agenda and into WHO. So we had a new side event here, joined with GLI, a great collaboration, and gathered again more than 20 associations, but also WHO, health ministers from different countries. And again, I think our key here was to get MASLD recognized as a non-communicable disease. And we are slowly moving forward. But the enthusiasm I felt there, having all these societies coming together for a shared vision. We come from many different places, different types of organization, etc. But a shared vision for advancing this, but also that WHO were actually very forthcoming, wanted to help us and to teach us how do you actually build this momentum to have all these countries coming behind us. So I see a fortunate future for those interested in these diseases.
So, Aleksander, that's fantastic. I'm mindful of Jeff Lazarus coming on this podcast a couple of times in the early years and noting that in the WHO health directives, the only time you saw the word liver was at the beginning of the word deliver, as in deliver services for oncology. So it's exciting to hear that the word without the D and the E in front is starting to get some traction. That's fantastic. Okay, Michelle or Hannes, brave one, go next.
I'll go next. I actually was recently also in Denmark, which was a lot of fun. Getting together with my colleagues face-to-face is always a good time and very high yield as we're working on so many things at Novo right now. It's also We Bike to Work cycle challenge for the month of May. And I got started when I was in Denmark and I've been continuing, and it's almost over as May is coming to an end, but I'm very close to my goal of getting to 500 kilometers, which is good for me here in the US, and I think will make my Danish colleagues proud. So we'll see. I'm
somewhere between proud and impressed since about, I probably ride about 50K a week, but I can't find a way to ride more than 25K without having some real problems in terms of the directions I can go in. So that's fantastic. Bravo. Hannes.
Awesome. So yes, I've been cycling a bit to work as well, which is now possible in Sweden since it's finally some sun and warmth. And so sounds like the common theme here is cycling. But doing that was very fun. And also we had a very nice surprise. I think it's official, so I don't spoil anything, but we have Fanny Romeo, who's a professor in Gothenburg. He's been coming to my institution in Stockholm. So he's, of course, the sort of godfather of PNPLA3. So I hope we can do some exciting things together. I think it's sort of official, but yeah.
That's fantastic news. That's fantastic news. For those who can't see, because we don't do this on video, Hannes just gave a 2 thumbs up on that one. That's fantastic news. I'm just going to talk about the weather. I am blessed to live in a apartment that overlooks the Delaware River and mountains on the other side. And when you hit the right time of year like this, we have hummingbirds on our deck. We have flowers on our deck. We have geese and all kinds of waterfowl flying around all hours of the day. And we set a little table for 2 out on our deck on what used to be a surfboard, and we eat outside every night. So this is quite possibly my favorite week of the year, just in terms of the weather being perfect. We've been blessed that we haven't had any rain or problems, so it's just been a great week to be alive. We'll just leave it at that. And with that, why don't we jump in? So, because we're fortunate enough to have Aleksander with us, I'd like you to kick us off and take a few minutes talking about what makes you excited about this meeting, and then what listeners will be excited about in terms of things that are either new or just really high impact this year. The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot. Where shall I start? It started a year ago. When these things are done, you take 1 week break and then you start to prepare the next thing. So we want to have it next level. We want to innovate beyond the state of the art. And I can tell you we have. So we just not want to meet your expectations. We want to exceed them. So I think if you are a true liver lover, if you're open-minded, if you're ready to be challenged, to learn, interact in new ways with global colleagues, learn new people, do things in new ways, this will be the best liver congress ever, I'm sure. So we, again, take the best of the best what we have, but every time try to twist it a little bit. We learned that being more interactive is very good. So more meet the expert, but also discussing controversy. So for the formats, we're trying to improve the format, the interactive format. People are changing. The world is changing around us. Us delivering content for people in a scientific congress.
But today it's much more than a scientific congress. This is actually what we will call a global marketplace for everybody. interested in the liver. So how do we provide that? This is more than lectures in the lecture room. This is interactions in our track hubs, discussions, meeting by research consortia, by patients advocacy groups, by allied healthcare professionals, in interprofessional interactions, but also case-based, which is new. We also got something about the future of hepatology. What direction are we going to? And also the skills learning centers we are very proud of, something that is super popular. And then, of course, we got almost record number of abstracts. So EASL is clearly manifested as the biggest and strongest meeting with almost 3,000 abstracts. Now we accepted 2,000 of them, and they are really, really high quality. So seeing that as a lead organizer here, you make me really happy and proud for the future of liver. Because if there's so much great research done, that will really move the field forward. And now if we focus on what we do in the MASLD MASH space, I'm not here to advertise for all our great people in the industry, but there are more than 10 advanced products of drugs. Yeah, we got one on the market, but we got 10 next level. There will be several phase 2 studies. Yeah, I don't think I need to mention them, but go to the general session, go to the late breakers. There's a lot. There's also poster tours about what's happening in understanding the mechanisms of the disease. How do we see it from a more basic science level, but also what are the breakthroughs in non-invasive tests? And if you want to have it a little bit more relaxed, we got the EASL Studio, the format. It will be the same, a little more twist than last year, but again, more theater-like. You were there, Michelle. You also know it. So it's an open scene where people can sit and listen to this interaction, and we broadcast live. I think that brings a lot of proximity between the experts, the discussion, and the audience. And many really like that. And there we will have at least 3 studios around this, one that focusing directly on MASLD anno 2024, rapidly changing landscape, we call it. We also got one around the nomenclature. The nomenclature is a child. It was born 1 year ago. How is the child doing? Does it need refinement? Are we happy with it? Did it advance as much as we hoped? This we will discuss. And we also got a studio session where Michelle and I will be, a few others, but what this has pioneered in the spectrum of steatotic liver disease is also a new interest in where alcohol is the important component, together with cardiometabolic risk factors in med-ALD and ALD. So we will discuss pioneering the drug development in that space. So I could continue here. We got, I think, almost 300 different types of sessions. We got more than 450 faculty that will do the best to bring this. I just saw the numbers. We're now way beyond 7,000 registrants and 80 different companies, 25 different patients groups, etc., etc. So I think my vision of being the global marketplace of the liver is coming true. So I'm really enthusiastic. Having prepared this party for a year, it looks like it's coming through pretty nicely.
That sounds fantastic. I was listening. I had 2 or 3 thoughts. First of all, the idea that you get 3,000 submissions, 2,000 of which are high enough quality to use, is, I think, a comment on liver disease and a comment on which the respect with people treat EASL. That's an awful lot of submissions, and you'd immediately bet a lot of them aren't all that good. But if they are that good, it means everyone in the world is working on putting out their best thing here.
No, so it is a competitive, we got a limited number of slots. So we want to make sure that when people come to EASL, just like the way EASL journals, they know what comes out of our journals, our meetings are really high level. Something that has been, there are at least 5 external reviews. The governing board is reviewing it again. So there are many, many people looking into this and say, okay, if we invite 7,000 people or more to a party, what we serve them, that better be good quality. And that's what we composed. And again, a little bit back here. So we got actually so much for the late breakers around MASLD that we needed to create a new session because we're also releasing the new MASLD guideline. So we actually opened a new session where the guideline is there, and then there are 4 other strong abstracts from that space. So it's again the balance of getting the best of the best. But I think there that people around can see that this platform with the global marketplace is a very attractive place to be no matter where you are. And I also think for the exhibition, if you go there, traditionally it was very much pharmaceutical industry. Now it's also very much diagnostic industry, but we're also attracting more and more of those who deliver things for the basic science research, but also publishers and many other people who can see themselves and will use this opportunity where everybody is in the city to meet and do what you do to communicate your messages and position yourself, but also connect and interact. And that's exactly what we want and believe in.
Superb. Hannes, Michelle, thoughts, questions, comments?
I'm really looking forward to it. It's like going to a place with a lot of very good restaurants, but you only have one stomach, so you have to decide where to go. The closer we are coming to this meeting, it's you get more and more invites to meetings and you have to go and see a lot of people. So you realize you will miss a few of the sessions, which is unfortunate. So it's too much to digest. We have to help out to keep track of everything in the group and so on.
Is the goal for 2025 to teach people how to clone themselves so that Hannes can have 3 meeting experiences in parallel and maybe get to at least 10% of what he wants?
No. Let me know. No, we've thought about that too. It would be wonderful with 2 Hanneses. Then research would be even better. But I'm not sure, Hannes, where you will position the second Hannes. The good thing here is if you signed up for this, all the things will be recorded and will be live broadcasted. So when you get home, there's a session you missed. It will be available on EASL Campus very fast. Also meaning if you have a morning, it's a little bit difficult to get out of bed. Then you just pick the first 2 sessions in the bed because it's broadcasted. Italy is a nice place. The food are nice. The climate are nice. And Milan is very nice. Who don't want to see The Last Supper and have a little bit of Italian food? Not a word about alcohol, but anyway, if you want to do this, then you can actually take the latest in the afternoon. So Hannes, no need for cloning, just to make sure you sign up in the right way, and then you can watch it all online or later on EASL Campus.
Yeah, unless you're talking, right? Because I think you don't want to see the chairs in their beds. But really looking forward to it.
But Hannes, if you're talking, I doubt we're going to have to clone your audience. I expect enough people will want to show up, particularly with the 7,000 person pool, for you to be happy and feel that you're getting out to a lot of people. Just a guess, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yes, and it's also a very nice opportunity for the younger people in our groups and so on to network and to be on the big stage. And I think that's really inspiring for people to, be up on the stage and talk in front of a few hundred people, maybe 1,000, maybe even more at a general session. And I see a lot of the younger people actually on stage this year, which I think is nice. I really encourage people also to dare to stand up in front of a crowd and ask questions. Usually if you have a good question, a lot of people have it as well. And sometimes there's this tendency that's only the established people that dares to go up to the microphone and ask questions. So really encourage everybody to make it an interactive session so we can share ideas and then learn from each other.
It makes me really happy you said that, Hannes, because this has been a specific priority for EASL. We sometimes had the usual suspects, there are people who almost own an area. That's not very healthy. So we actually changed also, if you try to check out the chairman. Many sessions we brought in the next generation, not just the usual suspects. It didn't make all of them happy, I have to say, but then I have maybe a few less friends. But let's see, if you're true friends of the liver, you think like Hannes do, then you want the next generation and to put them in front, learn them to be chairman, learn them how to interact. And we also got more, I think almost 300 bursaries for free registration travel for young people, exactly to bring them in. We also got, if you're young, I can go even if not young, but we got this famous young investigator party that's coming there. But another thing we are launching is the EASL alumni, because we want to bring together the young people, because they are the future, they are the next generation, and we need it to be attractive. So we're generating EASL alumni, so everybody who's been in an EASL school or an EASL ASLD masterclass, they will going forward be part of this alumni community. So we make sure that we generate that network, that you don't need to spend 10 years in research before you got a network and can make international collaboration. So I'm very happy you've seen that.
The other thing I've noticed, Aleksander, as well, these networking sessions, about half an hour, usually around large consortia or other projects. But it's really nice to see that, because now you have an open invitation, even if, you're just getting into the field, or if you're a potential collaborator or just someone who's interested in hearing what's going on, you have a slot now on the calendar and everyone's invited. So I just think it really speaks to how sort of open this community is to exploring different ideas and getting people together. I like the model. I'm going to check some of those out for sure.
Lovely. No, really, it's again that we're trying to help all these big consortia that do strong research, but how do we help position them? So they're sort of tied to EASL, and EASL also partner in many of those, and then bring the track hub so you can actually have your networking meeting, but also an opportunity to communicate your messages. Now we're both part of, for instance, the Liver Aim, but there are many others where we say, okay, this is actually joint forces between companies, academia. That's the way it works in the European funded projects, many of them, but then make this platform and also make it open for a wider audience. And that's also where the poster tours will start. So you do get an opportunity to have these top experts walking around interacting, which will bring people a little bit more up to speed to make sure that they have a good presentation there.
Aleksander, one thing I want to commend about what you just said, and I think this is true of the liver community in general, is having spent my career working in a whole bunch of different disease areas before I ever met you folks. The level of collaboration between researchers and then between companies and researchers researchers, and the number of links that everybody has is really impressive. There is a collegiality and a desire to share that you see in this space that you don't see in every specialty. And everything that you're talking about seems designed to foster that across generations, across everything, really. And that feels just remarkably healthy to me for the future of the specialty.
Again, that's why EASL is even more now. We revisited and will also present that at the opening and the General Assembly, our mission and vision. How do we see EASL? Why do EASL actually exist? So we actually vision driven. So we got a vision of what it is we want to be and how we want to get there. And then we can see everybody who wants to be part of that journey. And that's basically about advancing liver care through many different things, education, advocacy, policy, but also showing some leadership and taking this initiative, which is this kind of signal. And then this about the global marketplace, because of course we're just a medical society, a non-for-profit organization, but basically giving a platform for all these stakeholders to come together and interact. And that's where magic happens. And again, if relative to some of the other disease areas, we are still relatively small. And that's again what I open up saying when we communicate with WHO, we really need to make sure we come together, everybody, so our muscles are big and we speak one voice. Because if you're all over the place, people will not listen to you because, okay, agree among your own before you get here. And that is also happening. So this interaction, also the good relations that are built in the liver sister societies between EASL, ASLD, ALE, MASLD, as let's say the leading regional societies, but also beyond that is a really good basis for doing that global level policy.
Excellent. Michelle, anything in particular you're looking forward to at this meeting that we've not brought up yet?
So my number one tip for EASL now that it's become also my favorite meeting and been going for the last few years is do not sleep on the posters. Good news is that the abstract book is out. And so if you're a extracurricular abstract reader like I am, you can get going on that. So I also already have been through the abstract book and pulled out some of the top abstracts I want to read. I stopped at when I was cutting and pasting from the book at 75. Said, okay, well, I need to, I'll start there and see where I go. There's a lot of really, really high quality abstracts. Of course, go to the sessions. That's where it's fun and you can ask questions and have a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of really good abstracts. I mean, it got me super excited when I started going through it the other day. And actually, Aleksander and Hannes, you are authors on a few of my really top ones that I'm most interested in. So congratulations to that. So I really echo what you were saying there as well, Aleksander, around, this is a time in the field where we're seeing a lot of people coming together and collaborating. I sense that theme also in the abstracts. We're seeing a lot more data, especially linking NITs to outcomes. There's quite a few abstracts along this theme. And you start actually, if you read them all together one after another, they all start telling a very similar, very compelling story. And so that got me very, very excited. And I hope to use this meeting as an opportunity to get to talking to my colleagues also in industry, but also in academia and patient advocacy groups and everyone together around these ideas, because I do see that there's some convergence happening. And it's a little bit hard if you look at the whole meeting altogether. But if you start honing in on these little details and bringing these thoughts like this into one place, you'll see that this pattern is emerging. That is really exciting for the future of the field, I think.
So, Michelle, given what a great guest you always are, and that I've always thought you could do a fantastic podcast of your own, I'm going to invite you to do my job for the next 10 minutes, and here's what that looks like. Are you in a position where you can pick out one of the abstracts that Aleksander is on and one that Hannes is on that you're particularly excited about? Tell them about which one it is and allow them to comment on it?
Sure.
For those who are listening, please understand this is nowhere near the agenda I sent these guys, which was all of 5 lines long. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. So go ahead, Michelle.
This is very scary, Roger. Now we have to remember what we actually wrote.
Exactly. Okay, Aleksander, this one's you. Longitudinal changes in liver stiffness measurements in a population-based screening cohort of 5,517 participants.
Yeah. So let's not reveal the specific data, but again, trying to understand, this triangular hysterography is really positioned now as a backbone NIT, both good for diagnosis, but also prognosis and potentially also for treatment effect and for monitoring. That is coming through now, but how do we use it? How do we understand it? And there's, if you do a blood test, it could be alpha something. The variability is not very big, but that has been an issue around this. And as we already recommended in the Milano, that if you have a positive test, you repeat it. But the question is, what is the dynamic if you then take a huge population, and how are we going to deal with that? In particular, also, if we want to use this as a clinical trial endpoint. So thank you very much for highlighting that, Michelle.
Yes.
I'll not reveal the conclusion, but urge you to come and check it out.
So is that a poster or a presentation?
It's in the abstract book. It's a little hard to tell, but I think it's a presentation.
Aleksander, is that a presentation?
I think it's actually one of the top posters. The issue is that you got some of these, even with 5,000 patients, you will say this automatically go, but the way we try to compose it also, and if there are people who are, you cannot have the same people having too much in the same sessions. There's something with variation, so they get some of the top posters. I think it's probably a top poster, and I can't remember.
Okay, so everybody knows that's not a presentation to check off on your list, but it's a poster you have to make sure to get to while you're there. Excellent.
Yeah, and use also the interactive program. Go into the program. I really urge people to do that because, again, the meeting is a massive party, but it starts, with full speed, and it continues with full speed for 4 days. So your starting needs to be really sharp. And you can only do that by looking into the program. The program is made like that. You tick, and then it goes to your diary, your agenda there. So you can build your agenda. And I think Michelle already got 75 there. That's ambitious, but she is very ambitious. You can do other things, but that's actually the way to do it. And also, I urge you to, when you get there, then don't get there late, because it's also a big center. So sometimes in the beginning, in a new center, you waste some time finding your way around. Get there, get a little accustomed to it, know where the different rooms are and the coffee is, and then have it planned. Then you get much more out of it.
Okay, the other one that I have also, Hannes, you're on this as an author, the validation of Pavino Rule of 5 in a real-life multi-center cohort of patients with metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease.
You're making me feel smarter, Michelle. That was one of the ones that jumped out at me, too, and I've only taken a really cursory read. Go ahead, Hannes.
Yeah, so thank you. But this is one of these, works where you're involved by sharing the information. So it's a very nice example of a multi-center cohort, which is something I think we need to do much more in our small field, as you alluded to before, Aleksander. So I think this is really the way to go to, build big cohorts so we get a lot of data, and also going away from these single center studies, which can usually not be replicated elsewhere. So I think this is really the way to go. And this is just a paper where the main authors have looked at, validating the Pavino 5 criteria, which I think is very important. And as Aleksander, following your example, I will not spoil the abstract, but people have to check it out for themselves. But I really applaud the authors here to make this big collaboration.
Okay, Michelle, now for full guest podcaster credit, let's see if we can do this one. So Jörn has just joined us. Do you happen to have one of the 75 that Jörn is on, or is that too much to ask for?
Yeah, I'm sure.
75, what? So good evening. Hello, thanks.
So Jörn, to bring you back a little bit, here's a surprise for you. This is nowhere near the agenda. Michelle mentioned that she found 75 abstracts of real interest. So I invited her to play guest podcaster, and because she mentioned that Aleksander was on one and Hannes was on one, and I invited her to tell them which they were and ask them to talk about it a little bit. Now, I don't know if you have any of Jörn's, and if you don't, that's perfectly understandable. But if somehow it turned out you did.
No, I definitely did. It's just a question of, can I find them in my list here? There were several, actually, with Jörn's name. I like to look out for what he's got going on at all times.
I think we got Jörn a few times in the late break, and also think in some of the sessions, Jörn.
Yes. So while Michelle is looking, EASL invited me to talk on a session that Hannes Hagstrom is actually chairing on the future of hepatology, and I'm going to be speaking on the use of AI. So I was challenging ChatGPT today about hepatology and trying to figure out new things and thinking how that could change my practice. And there's a lot more than ChatGPT, obviously, in AI. That should be a fun session, and I believe we have also stellar co-guests, and really looking forward to that session. It's in the Gold Room. That's the big one, Hannes, right?
I think so. I haven't been to this particular conference, but Gold is always big, right?
So, Aleksander, how big is Gold?
It would be a massive attraction, guys. So.
But I'm really looking forward to this session as well. We're sort of trying to talk a little bit about, what do we think the field will look like in about 5 years? Where will we be? But also, what do we need to do to get there? You were talking about vision and mission before, Aleksander, and this is like trying to peek a little bit into the future to see what can these ideas give and lead to in the future, and what do we need to do? So I think the days are over when we can sit on our chamber and do retrospective studies. So we really need to collaborate and help each other.
So I'm hoping Michelle now has her Jörn abstract. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I found the one that caught my eye of, I think, maybe the at least 5 or 6 that I saw in here from you, Jörn. But this was the causes of death, mortality rates, and the role of socio-demographic risk factors and biomarkers in metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, mortality in more than 18,000 real-world patients from the United States. So talk about, big data, pulling it together and getting some really cool insights.
Yes. So that was Target NASH and some additional biobanks we've explored. And of course, I think the the real-world data is really important, because all the patients I'm seeing are so highly selected that it's difficult to extrapolate to the true event in the population. So I think these type of approaches, where a group of co-authors and colleagues use this from the Optum healthcare registry, is something where we're going to gain more information on. And it's a poster presentation on Friday. So things that came out were like cause of mortality, the mortality rate. And we saw, for example, that EGFR decrease was associated with that. So you can get some linked data. I know Hannes has been looking at these things in the databases he has available. And here the Optum electronic healthcare records were explored and gave us some very nice insights, looking at genetics aspects, among others.
Fantastic. So now that Michelle has done my job, I'm going to go back to the agenda and ask each of you to do yours, which is I asked each of you to come prepared to talk about something you were presenting or your group was presenting at the meeting. And you can't go back to what Michelle just asked about. That's too easy. So if that was what you're prepared to talk about, you got to come up with something else. But brave one, go first. What are you presenting here that our audience will find interesting?
So we got a nice work, I think, on Friday afternoon in the microbiome section, actually. But we did in the Galaxy Consortium, had almost 900 people. It's a big Horizon 2020 consortium. 900 people with steatotic liver disease across the spectrum. But what we did for the first time was true multi-omics analysis. So we have 18 layers of omics, means anything from genetics to proteomics to lipidomics, but also, so that's the host factors. And then we got the microbiome factors, metagenomics, metatranscriptomics, lipidomics, as a mass spec also of fecal. So a massive way of understanding patients across the natural history, and discovered more than 800 features, of which I think almost 500 were highly significant, associated with different parts of the disease. So that opened sort of a new box to, if you unleash the power of omics, a new box to what potential biomarkers come out for the next generation. So that has taken us quite a while to get there. So I'm a bit excited to see how that. It's not the easiest way to communicate, actually, if you've got a wealth of data that is so massive, and yet also trying to integrate this, because then you can basically try to understand diseases as a systemic wide level. So we don't just go to one thing, but you actually link it all the way down to genes, activated genes, and microRNAs, whatever regulates things, all the way down to a protein or metabolite that is associated with disease activity. And all these patients also were having phenotyping, including liver biopsies, etc. So that's kind of opening to a new world for biomarkers. So that's.
So I have a question for you. That paper sounds tremendously ambitious in scope. 500 significant variables. As a statistician, my head starts to spin.
Yeah, you cannot do that. It is bioinformatics. It is really complicated to do that. And again, if you multiply 900 patients, and each patient, if you do whole genome sequencing for just the host, and then you have similar for the gut, etc. So yeah, this takes a whole computer house to manage. This is 10 to the 11th data in that study alone. So that's a lot.
Okay, my head is spinning. So are you able to get that down to the idea that goes, you can only make 3 points in 20 minutes? Were you able to get it down to 3 things? Or
I pushed one of my fellows to do it, and I think she's trying to explain that this is actually a wealth of resources of what people can then potentially pick out and try to use. But there are many features that that changes, increases with disease severity, but there are also many that decreases. And again, the next frontier in biomarkers is not diagnostic prognostics. That's how we monitor it, but also see how do we non-invasively best assess treatment effects. And some of these things we will need, and how can we transform the clinical endpoint from histology-driven to based on non-invasive biomarkers. And I think that story is by far ended yet. So there will be some more to look into here.
Aleksander, I just scanned the abstract too, and I think it very nicely, with your group and the depth of the whole consortium, it repaints the pictures we kind of looking at the mechanistic level. Also, you identified interleukin 8, I believe, and some TGF I was seeing in the abstract. So the complexity of the data increases, but we're still looking at some of the same pathways we've been studying. It's nice to see that this is reinforced even by the deeper analysis and levels of data that you're introducing here.
Yeah, some of the cytokines also come on. Today you can relatively easy measure hundreds of different cytokines and then try to link that. Also link us a little bit to our understanding of the pathophysiology. And then the whole thing is then coming into to have the opportunity to also see what is the weight of, let's say, what is driven by the gut, how do you see, what is inflammatory driven, what is linked to the host genetic factors, et cetera, to try to bring it together. But it becomes a little complex. But I guess humans and diseases are a bit complex.
As a physician, I wanted easy answer.
Yeah, that's the thing. We need to bring it. That's then the challenge. We needed to bring it into something that is clinically actionable. And that's where I think the next level of doing the way we do and manage these, we can have complex analysis, but then we have analytical tools basically driven by AI and machine learning to come up with a relatively simple answer, because that's what we want. Should we treat or not treat the patient, or should we stop or not stop the drug? Does the drug work? Yes or no? But I still think we can have complex machinery, but it needs to come up with something that's actionable. That's for next year's abstract, Jörn.
So, Aleksander, one of the things I find interesting about that is I'm a complexity theory buff of sorts. And one of the ideas behind complexity theory is pretty simple. If you think about fractal geometry, for example, if you don't worry about things being identical but only similar, you can find a limited number of patterns that really matter. And it's when we try to get it to perfect that things get complicated, and simplicity and complexity could go together, but complication can't. So when you talk about trying to boil a real complex data set down into a few core themes, you're hitting me kind of right where I live. I think that's just a fantastic effort.
That's what we need. Again, the power of these tools. You can see today, doing a host genetic costs nothing. It's really no issue. The only reason why we're not using it very much in clinics is because we don't know how to use it. Mm-hmm. So you can do basically host genetics. Everybody should have that, because that is the only biomarker that is stable for life.
Right.
And that can be used and integrated at any time point. We just need the machinery who can actually at different type level tell you what does it mean. Also see with these polygenic risks for us. You don't need to look into one or two genes. You can look into many of them in combination that tells a different story.
Excellent. Okay, Hannes, you're up.
Okay, thank you. So we will have, I'll mention two, which are unfortunately two orals from our group, which is, unfortunately, they are on the exact same time and date. So I have to really clone myself here, Aleksander, to go to listen to both.
I also have two at the same time.
But so it's sort of on the same topic. It's very much big data, but it's not omics. It's more many patients. So we have one new data set where we have identified everybody in Stockholm with a liver test between 2010 and 2022, and it's turned out to be 860,000 people. And then we try to estimate, the modern prevalence of steatotic liver disease and so on. And in one study, we used a rather novel non-invasive risk score developed by Stefano Romeo's group called Fibrotic NASH Index, which tries to estimate the presence of MASH with F2 or to F4 in the Stockholm population. And of course, it's a little bit selection bias, because you can only measure the people with have a ALT test, but turns out that's 860,000 people, so it's maybe not that selective. And then we will present, what's the underlying at-risk population, and we also can see that if you use that, you can actually identify a group of patients which are at high risk for both liver-related but also quite high risk for cardiovascular-related outcomes. So you sort of really identify an at-risk group that would need sort of holistic treatment. So that's one which is going to be presented on Friday morning, and the other, which is also quite interesting, I think, is a new prediction model for liver-related outcomes in the general population. So as today we try to get people to calculate the FIB4, and that has its own limitations with a lot of false positives but also false negatives. But this is moving into a little bit different philosophy, where we, instead of trying to diagnose something, this model is telling you, okay, what's the percentage in this individual patient that he or she will get a liver-related outcome within 10 years. And the model is then, predicting that risk. So you enter a few very simple parameters, AST, ALT, gamma GT, age, and sex, and you get the percentage. Then we have validated these results in several big cohorts, including UK Biobank, and it stands out pretty good, and it's far better than FIB4. So we will present that, and we will also present a small calculator, web-based calculator, where people can go and estimate the risk. And I think one thing I'm trying to push, that we maybe need to go in that direction of, as a first-line test, maybe not make a diagnosis, but maybe make a risk assessment and decide on the next steps based on that. The tricky part is, however, to decide on what is the risk threshold that we are comfortable with. When do we refer patients to a hepatologist? Should it be at 5% or 10% or 0.5%? And that's a little bit also up to the individual patient and then the caregivers and the health system that you are in. What are your resources? So that's going to be interesting. And the first paper is developed by one of my PhD students, Emily, who's a brilliant PhD student and health economist actually, and the other one is by an equally brilliant postdoc, Krag, who is a mathematician and a biostatistician. He actually wrote a very nice also seminar in JHEP, we published recently, about like a guide, how do you really make a prediction model. So high quality stuff, I think.
Hannes, when I listen to you, I wonder how big a database is big enough, or is there too big? When do you get overestimation of effects because you keep on including more and more patients? I know you must have been thinking about that.
No, I mean, if you have a big enough data sets, then you don't need to make any statistical tests, right? You can just say, well, this is the whole population. So this is not a sample anymore. This is the truth.
It's a dream of the epidemiologist, Hannes.
I like the way you think about this. Yeah.
And yet you're still at the database level. So we try to go closer to the patients. And I guess that's exactly the interaction. You need both, basically.
Yes, I think these are complementary things, right? I'm finding it a bit difficult to, do. Maybe we will get down in price, and so with the genetics and the omics, so we can implement it on a broader level. But for now, I think we maybe need those tools, in our specialty clinics where we see patients, and maybe at the primary care level, we need something a bit more simple. That's my view as well.
Yeah, Hannes, I really like where you're going with this. I think the risk-based view of this disease makes a lot of sense, especially also thinking about the new nomenclature and how it plays out. If you can define the disease by metabolic risk factors and presence of fat in the liver, and then you can say, okay, this person is at so much risk of liver events, that means something to patient. It means something to health authorities, payers, everybody. It's very tangible, rather than you're diagnosed with some F stage maybe by this one pathologist versus another. So I really like it. I think it's a smart way of looking at the future. So well done. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Hannes, I can only agree that we need to go to the next level. We continue to push FIP4, but I think that should just be seen as an example of an index test. We got in liver screen, we did the liver risk score, and we developed the liver pro score, which we will also present here, developed in 10,000 with liver biopsy and validated in 460,000 UK biobank, and outperforms all the others. And I think there what we manage now is to get a CE marking. So it actually has a quality stamp to implement it in. So actually we do have the tools now that can be implemented in hospital system, because the issue is often you come with something that's smarter, but you cannot use them there because there are all these regulatory things. So we managed to pass that barrier. And I do agree that this is the next level, because the FIP4 is associated with, it's a good one for rule out, but it is, if we have the cutoff 1.3, associated with many false positives. And healthcare systems, we simply drown. There's not enough of us, and we will never have a cost-effective healthcare pathway if we do not have something more effective as the index test, the cheap test, very close to the patient. So that's again something very important work we will do in the coming years. So we do love the new nomenclature, etc., but also need to be checked out. So and the interesting thing is that the behavior do changes. So what we had the opportunity to do, it will be a late breaker. It's actually the abstract that's presented in the new session just before the MASLD guideline. So what we did was we had 1,000 people we assessed 3 years back for steatotic liver disease. And what we did then, we reassessed them then 3 years down, roughly 3 years down the road. And then we say, okay, we take the nomenclature face value, put it down here, index, and then we see 3 years later. And then we see how many change group. We basically have 4 groups: no SLD, MASLD, mid-ALD, and ALD. And you'll be surprised that this is more dynamic than we think, because particular alcohol consumption can change, steatosis can change, cardiovascular risk factors not so much. But this has some implications, How do we see this? And also in terms of clinical trials, where do people end in? When are they eligible for trial? But also when are they eligible for treatment, depending on these things. So, I'll urge you also to have a look at that one.
So as a guy who comes from a policy background, which is where I started out a long, long time ago, you just have blown my mind twice. Hannes, as a policymaker, if I had a finite budget to spend on SLD, I would love to find the most efficient way to drill down to the patients where I need to do the kinds of things that we're talking about with omics and genetics and all that, right? Spend as much of my money as possible on the subsection of the patient population that really needs that money spent on it. So the cheaper we can make good screening, the better a job we can do at treating the sick. So that's the one. And Aleksander, I'm fascinated from a very different perspective on yours, which is that those are massively important decisions in terms of designing trials. And if trials tell us what works and what doesn't work, there's tremendous power in being able to do that better. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. We need, the closer we get to patients with the lower prevalence in the population, and we should have very cheap, effective tests that does not involve guys like us. But the closer you come to important decisions such as treatment or not, and long-term treatment that's probably costly, then you can actually afford more advanced tests. And if you want to assess the treatment effect, let's say 1 year down the road, again, you should not continue infinitely on any drug if you're not sure it actually works. There again, you will see the cost benefit of having also, let's say, it could be an omics-based test, which would often be more expensive than some of the simple tests we use indexly, but it also provides a decision for an important decision that actually comes with some consequences of also financial side. So that's the ecosystem we need to see. Where are these non-invasive tests placed and what decision do they actually guide?
Okay. Excellent. And with that, let me Jörn, you want to talk about something that you're going to be part of there that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, I missed part of the first part of this, but obviously I'm very excited to be part of the abstract session of MASLD therapy, which is chaired by Vlad and Penelope Manusu. And we're going to introduce there an abstract, or we're going to present an abstract on a totally new concept to treat steatotic liver disease using a transglutaminase inhibitor. So this is an early trial, phase 2A. So non-invasively biomarkers are used, and transglutaminases are actually involved in the activation of TGF-beta, and they've been trialed successfully in celiac disease because they're linked to the activation of gluten there. This is something that proved very successful. We've taken that based on the preclinical data and some early clinical data and did a short proof of concept study I'm going to be presenting there on in the MASLD therapy session. So I think it's a new angle of treatments. We're seeing a lot of the metabolic drugs, and this transglutaminase inhibition is something that comes in as a new kid on the block, I would say.
Fantastic.
Early data. Very exciting.
Very exciting, Jörn. That's why we put them there. No, but this new way of learning, thinking, how can we, and also see what you bridge there from actually the working in the celiac field now before you're in an environment where there were a lot of activity there, and bridging that to MASLD. I think that's really interesting.
And to tell you that story, it's nice. I've been in Mainz working with Detlef Schupan for some time, who's been big in celiac disease. And when he told me about that, we started thinking about it, and he actually had some preclinical animal models where he saw effects, and we just kind of transferred it from there. So that's really a translational thing, sitting together, thinking about what this guy's been doing, how could we transfer this. It's a nice little study.
You know, I'd seen that abstract also and was going to ask you about it, but we haven't had a chance to talk. Now we have. That's great. Michelle, are you presenting in the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Share with us.
Yeah. So it's a late breaker abstract, so it's under embargo, so I can't say many details, but it basically is a sub-analysis from the SELECT study. So the SELECT study is a recently published Novo Nordisk trial that is a cardiovascular outcome study in patients who have obesity but without type 2 diabetes. So we were able to, in this abstract, look at a MASH-like population and then study what happened when you had semaglutide versus placebo. But what's so exciting about this is, I mean, this is really good use of a big data set, right? And it's so hard for us to have randomized controlled trial level data with so many patients. And we haven't been able to do that in this field. So, you know, Novo Nordisk being this metabolic disease giant, we have a lot of trials that are coming out and our colleagues across the hall, and we can say now, oh, look at that. You know, what if we try to define MASH in that population and see what happens? So I think it's exciting. It's a type of analysis that people have been coming up to me saying, you're going to do that, right? So it's finally nice to show a peek at what we're doing inside. This is the first of many such ideas that we're pursuing internally. So I'm really excited to share that. The embargo will come up, I think, maybe Wednesday or something next week. So you'll be able to see that in full detail soon. And then excited to participate in some of the other industry satellite symposia and other things, but really looking forward to our talk at the EASL Studios, Aleksander, where I'm sure you'll be provocative as you are, but it should be a lot of fun talking about ALD, and maybe we'll get to also talk about the clinical trial that we're doing, a proof of concept trial in ALD at Novo as well.
Fantastic.
Very cool. That sounds also, quite something that we might actually end up in, having a MASH-like population in primary care, for instance. So it will be interesting to see how you define that and what parameters that were included.
So, Jörn, it strikes me that with the exception of the study you just described, everything we've been talking about here is about interesting and innovative uses of the ways that you can combine and reconfigure data that exist, right? Large databases, taking a database purpose for A and turning about 15 degrees and making it work on A prime. That's really exciting because ultimately resources are limited. So the more you can do with what you got, and some of these questions sound fantastic. So we're heading towards the bottom of the hour. Let me ask first if anybody has anything they want to add. Jörn, you got something in your mind.
The thing I want to add here is, I guess, Roger, we have more technology, of course, now to look at those data again. And Hannes mentioned he works with a mathematician and a data scientist. Back in the days, you went to the lab and had a biologist and maybe a technician. And these days, with all the data sets that's been generated, also through EASL and EU funding, there's so much data left. I mean, Aleksander is going to be analyzing data from his EU calls for the rest of his life. We have great studies in the field, and now we need people like Hannes and Aleksander and refining that, asking from different angles and bringing in new technologies, including AI, which we're going to be discussing, and partnering with other experts like mathematicians and data scientists to understand what's in those data sets. I think a lot more can be done that way.
One final thing here. So to prepare for the meeting, then you get more out of it. The abstract book is out there, and also the view of the venue, and come in good time. Come good time also for the session. Then you have time to talk to your friends before it all starts. But another thing I also want to urge people, everybody who's active on social media, LinkedIn, X, or any social media, do share it here. Because we are here to advance the entire field. And as we already discussed in the beginning, we cannot be everywhere at the same time, but we can bring people's attention to it also outside those 7,000 plus people in Milan at that time. So I think we should really use this opportunity. I'm sure you will also do it, Roger, and Hannes, and Michelle, and many others. But use this opportunity to flag the liver as much as you can.
Fantastic. So I'm going to take that as your closing comment. Michelle, Hannes, one big picture thing that you expect to leave Milano that that'll really be exciting?
I guess I can go. I mean, we've talked a lot about the big data, but then there's some really exciting abstracts, I think, that are late breakers that are highly anticipated by not only me, but many in the field, looking at data from Lilly and from BI. So some really exciting results, I think, that could be very practice changing ultimately. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that's later on in the week, maybe Friday and maybe Saturday, if I have that right.
Okay. Good, Hannes?
Oh, it's tough, Roger, but I think I will, go back to Stockholm from EASL the way I usually do, with more of many things, more knowledge, more impressions, more collaborations, more research ideas, and being Italy, probably more calories as well. But
let's have a pasta together, Hannes.
Take you up on that one.
If it's a party and I get there, I'd love to join you guys. That would be great. Family issues abiding, I will get there, and I'm hoping I will. Jörn, anything you want to add?
Well, we're seeing secondary analysis of a phase 3 trial that led to the first drug approval in the field of MASLD, so that's clearly very exciting, and some big companies moving in here, and EASL is really the home for these data and research-driven companies developing the field, so I'm just very happy to be there and contribute.
So a thought to close. This is the 5th year we've been doing this podcast. This is the 9th or 10th major meeting, if you count only EASL and AASLD, that we've previewed. And every other part of it's about who's on the call, but part of it is actually about the content. This is the first one we've done where people didn't start by talking about exciting drug development. And instead we started talking about exciting data development. And there's tons of important drug stuff in this meeting. I don't mean to belittle any of it, but I take your point, which is that we're getting to a place where we know the drugs are moving forward. Now the question question is, what can we do for the disease? And the disease has to be about data development and all the forms of enrichment that you're talking about. So to our audience, at a very, very high level, don't only listen to this meeting because this has been fascinating, and I basically want to just sit back and listen, which is always good for me, but think about the mind shift that underlies the way that this episode has flown. I think it's a fantastic statement about the future. Aleksander, I can't wait. Like I say, I'm hoping my situation, and I can get there on Tuesday, because it's a meeting that everyone in the world who possibly can get to should get to. And really exciting event. Anyone have anything to do before we say goodbye? Or let me thank everyone. It's been a fantastic episode. I think one of my 5 or 6 favorites ever.
One final thing. So what we really want, I think my success criteria is that people leave with enthusiasm. They leave with optimism. They can see, no, we can actually do it. We know a lot about the unmet needs. We know a lot about the barriers. But when you can see this global community come together, you can see all these breakthroughs. No, it's really happening. Some of the things we dreamt about. We can do it. We can actually change it. We can make a more fortunate future for the future generations of liberties, and we can help also those that are there. That's the feeling we should have, and go home ignited and want to do more.
I also have a comment, Roger. I really liked your reflection. And I think that, even though we didn't directly talk about drug development in the sense of this new hot mechanism of action, can drugs move the needle in this disease? We now know that to be true with the first drug approved in the US. But all the things that we're talking about on how we think about the disease, linking NITs to outcomes, all of this ultimately is the next phase, right? This is how you transform drug development. And that's what we're seeing here coming from this meeting. And that, I think, is why you're feeling that energy here. And I can't wait to feel that energy in person in Milan. I think that's what we're going to get this time around.
I'm right there with you, Michelle. I reflect back to the first time I showed up at NASDAQ in 2019, and the question everyone was asking was, how can we get a 1 fibrosis level reduction on a clinical trial? We are so far past that. All to the good. Jörn, Hannes, closing thoughts?
Looking forward to that pasta, Hannes.
Sounds like a good final thought.
Thank you, everybody. I think this has been as enjoyable an episode as we've done in years. So thanks, everybody, for being a part of it. And I will be back with the question of the week and business report in a moment. And I hope to see all you folks next week in Italy.
Safe travels, guys.
Ciao, y'all.
Bye.
As they say in Southern Italy. Ciao, y'all.
Bye. Ciao.
This week's question of the week is sponsored by Madrigal Pharmaceuticals.
And here's this week's question of the week. At the end of this episode, Michelle Long comments that the kinds of large multi-database analyses we discussed today are the key to the next phase of drug development. One other listener has suggested that we might not be quite that far along in learning drug development and evaluation yet. How about you? What do you see as the sources of insight and creativity that will drive the next generation of drug development?
And now for the Season 5, Episode 17 Business Report.
Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. It's clear that the delay in sending arms to Ukraine emboldened Putin and perhaps other autocrats all over the world. We need to place our continued faith and send our good wishes and feelings to the brave fighters of Ukraine, and to share a debt of gratitude with European countries, most if not all NATO members, that have given substantive support and resources to Ukraine before we did. Thank them all. This week in Israel, more bodies of dead hostages were found. This is one more reminder of where this horror started. You can remember how evil October 7th was and not be pro-Netanyahu. In fact, the massive street demonstrations that took place against Netanyahu government last summer are back again, this time about the immediate return of hostages. And as I said last week, you could be a Zionist and not be pro-Netanyahu as well. With that said, let's take a moment to remember those who still are hostages in Israel, pray for their safe return, and also to remember how this awful situation started in the first place, and to pray for the safety of those in Palestine. Heroyam Slava, glory to heroes, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Next week, Milano.
Next week, the eyes of the liver world will be on Milano and the 2024 EASL Congress. Some of the numbers Aleksander Krag shared today are staggering. Over 7,000 attendees, 2,000 accepted abstracts. Wow. Given how packed the meeting schedule is, we will not be recording episodes in Milano, but instead we'll do post episodes in the 2 following weeks. If I'm able to go to Milano, I will conduct and post one-on-one and one-on-two interviews from the event. If I'm not, Louise may be able to do a few. We've not talked about it yet. In any case, I'll post a video once I know my plans.
We have started sending LinkedIn followers invitations to join our private community.
Starting yesterday, we're sending 15 to 25 LinkedIn follower invitations daily. Specifically, we invite you to join our community by enrolling in our private membership list. Members receive 3 major benefits: the weekly newsletter, the audience invitations, and ability to participate in office hours. I'll discuss the schedule for some of that on the next point.
As we promise in the private community invitations, we have new features coming.
We will initiate our live audience invitations for the first EASL follow-up on June 10th or 11th, which will be our first post-episode recording. I also anticipate our first midweek conversation, which will provide fresh, novel content that week. My weekly office hours will start a week or 2 later.
This week's vault comes from last year's EASL preview.
Last year's EASL Congress preview included a section specifically on how last year's program came together. If Aleksander Krag's big party metaphor today sounds vaguely familiar, listen to this, you'll hear it again. And that's it for this week. I want to thank our team, Jörn, Louise, Mike, Eric, Steve, and for Michelle Long, who played the podcaster role for about 10 minutes in today's episode. As we keep moving forward, please take a listen to our question of the week and, of course, reply. If you're a LinkedIn follower and you've not gotten an email or an in-mail from me yet, check your in-mail and messages for an invitation to subscribe to our weekly piece over the next week. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure what we're covering, given that the entire KOL world is preparing to converge on Italy on Monday. Until then, stay safe and surf on. Bye-bye now.
Have any questions for the surfers? You can send them to questions@surfingmash.com and we will answer on the podcast or website. Your question might even wind up being the question of the week.